Throughout Japanese history, the stories always circle back to the samurai. Those warriors celebrated for their honor, loyalty, and their, let's say, artistic ability to slice a man clean in half with one perfectly poetic swing of a sword. People wrote songs about them, built statues for them, and told and retold their bloody victories, as if glory only came in one form, a man with a sword, staring stoically under cherry blossoms. But here's the thing, history tends to skip a small detail that changes everything. There was a time when that deadly strength wasn't exclusive to men. Yep, you heard that right. There were women, real women, who wore armor, carried blades, and fought beneath the same crimson sky of blood and cherry petals. They were called Ona-bu-geisha, literally, female warriors. It sounds gentle like a brand of green tea, but trust me, if you ever faced one in battle, you'd wish you hadn't even heard the word Bushido. That's the way of the warrior, a code so strict honor meant more than, well, your internal organs. Now, society back then had one clear rule. Women weren't supposed to wield weapons. But these women did anyway, not to imitate men, but to defend their own honor. Because when war comes knocking, nobody has time to debate gender roles. Out of hundreds of forgotten names, one woman refused to disappear into history's footnotes. A woman so fierce that even her enemies remembered her. She made male historians cough awkwardly and flip the page, because admitting she was braver, and better, than most of them, wasn't exactly easy on the ego. Her name was Tomoe Gozen, the woman who shattered the myth that samurai was a men only. Club Japan at that time was in the Heisen period, an age where beauty and death often walked hand in hand, like tea and mochi. The battlefield was where honor and life balanced on the same blade. Historians call it the Genpei War, 1180-1185, a massive civil war between two powerful clans, the Minamoto and the Taira. Sounds complicated? Okay, picture this. Game of Thrones, but set in ancient Japan. No dragons, no ice zombies, just lots and lots of decapitations. And in the middle of that chaos stood one woman, wielding a naginata, a long curved blade spear. Elegant enough to dance with, deadly enough to make sure her opponent never stood up again. Each swing was part art, part execution. Tomoe didn't fight just for her lord. She fought for herself, for the right to exist in a world that never planned to make space for her. She wasn't just a warrior. She was a living contradiction. A woman embodying the spirit of an age that pretended women didn't exist in it. And here's the irony. She still fought, still won, and still carved her name into legend, even as history tried to erase her. Maybe the world back then wasn't ready for her image. Honestly, maybe it still isn't, but that's fine. We're not here to make history feel comfortable. We're here to crack it open, dust it off, and maybe laugh a little at how humanity once believed that strength came with a gender. So take a deep breath. Hear the taiko drums thunder in the distance. See the moonlight flash across a blade. Smell the faint sweetness of cherry blossoms mixing with iron and smoke. Because right now, you're about to step into the story of a woman who made an entire era question itself. Tomoe Gozen, the fiercest female warrior in Japan's history. Back before the name Tomoe Gozen sliced its way into the history books, Japan was a country of swords, blood, and way too much honor. People would literally kill each other to prove they were the more polite one. Honor wasn't a philosophy class topic. It was the reason to live, to die, and to do things most of us today would call not the brightest ideas. They called that era heian, which sounds fancy. Poems, silk kimono, tea ceremonies, moon viewing parties. Don't let the silk fool you. Under that pretty fabric, a web of schemes and hidden blades. If you were in Kyoto, you saw nobles writing love poetry to the moon. Step a few miles out, samurai drawing steel because someone looked at me funny. Power back then was basically a math problem. More soldiers, more land, more taxes, even more soldiers. A perfect loop, if you ignore the small detail where everything is covered in blood. The two biggest clans were Minamoto, white armor, and Taira, red armor, both auditioning to be final boss of Japan. They fought non-stop from 1180 to 1185 in what history calls the Genpei War. Sounds epic, right? Strip it down and it's Game of Thrones, Heian edition. No dragons, just a lot more heads rolling. While the guys were busy competing to see who could be more manly, something else was happening back home. Other warriors were sharpening blades too. Only difference? They wore their hair up, their kimono tied, and history often forgot to mention them. They were Onabu geisha, female warriors. Not legends, not temple ghosts, real people. Born into samurai families, taught that the clan's honor didn't just rest in a husband's or a brother's hands, it could rest in theirs. From childhood they trained with the naginata, a long polearm with a curved blade at the end. Graceful to watch, fatal to meet. Beautiful? Sure, but remember, it was designed to take off heads. With men gone for long campaigns, women didn't just keep the home. They kept the village, and sometimes the family's honor, alive. An Onabu geisha didn't just mend armor, she wore it. She didn't just wait at the gate, she stood there, hand on the shaft of the naginata, ready to politely correct anyone who came in wrong. And among those warriors stood one name even enemies bowed their heads to, Tomoe Gozen. No one knows when she was born, because, medieval Japanese records weren't great about women. What we do know, she served Minamoto no Yoshinaka, a brilliant, hot-headed general who crucially had zero problem with women wielding weapons, as long as they knew how to use them. Tomoe didn't just know. She was built for it. The epic Heike Monogatari, think the Iliad of Japan, describes her as stunningly beautiful, a master on horseback, and strong enough to cut down any foe. Sounds like Hollywood hype, right? Except the Japanese meant it. She wasn't a symbol, she was a commander, a real woman, leading real troops, riding into real battle, cutting down very real people. Need a highlight reel? Try this. Awazu, 1184. Yoshinaka is surrounded. Death is basically tapping him on the shoulder. He turns to Tomoe and says, "You should withdraw. I don't want a woman dying beside me." If this were an American movie, the theater would yell, "Don't do it, dude." And yeah, that was his worst decision. Tomoe spins her horse, draws her blade, and charges straight into the enemy like a one-woman tornado. She carves through lines of Taira soldiers, dropping them one by one. Then she locks onto a famous enemy commander, Honda no Moroshige. One strike, head off. Tomoe calmly picks it up, ties it to her saddle, and rides away. Not fleeing, just taking the receipt for honor. What happened after? No one really knows. Some say she was captured and became a nun. Others say she died on the field, sword in hand. Either way, she left a cut in history that's still bleeding through the pages. To understand Tomoe, you have to understand Bushido, the way of the warrior. Sounds elegant, but it's basically Shinto plus Confucian duty plus planned self-destruction. Samurai believed failure was shame. Better to commit seppuku, ritual suicide, than live dishonored. Tomoe breathed that code. She didn't fight to prove women were stronger than men. She fought because there wasn't another option. If she lost, her clan lost its name. If she won, people called it luck. If she survived, they said she wasn't worth remembering. That's the funny, not funny thing about history. It loves winners, so long as they're the right gender. The Minamoto won. Peace returned. And, cruel punchline, peace had no place for someone like Tomoe. Women were pushed back behind doors, wrapped in kimono and silence. Male historians rewrote the story, smoothing it over with lines like, "She was beautiful, but fierce." The kind of compliment women across centuries have heard and wanted to flip a table over. So her image faded. Paintings turned her into an icon, not a person. Chronicles quietly trimmed her from the list of commanders, as if history sighed and whispered, yes, she existed. Let's not make a big deal out of it. But time has a sense of humor. Centuries later, Tomoe Gozen came back. Not in textbooks, at least not first, but in novels, prints, films, video games, cosplay, even memes. People told her story again. The woman who made a whole nation ask, maybe we got strength wrong. Today, she's often held up as an early feminist icon in Asia. But if you could ask Tomoe, she'd probably shrug. I wasn't fighting for equality. I was doing what had to be done, and maybe that's exactly why she became an icon. So if you ever find yourself in Kyoto, taiko drums echoing from the hills, listen closely. You might hear the faint thunder of hooves. Tomoe's not as a myth, but as a human being the centuries refuse to delete. Because history isn't always written in ink. Sometimes it's written in blood, and signed, with a blade. By now, if you still picture ancient Japan as a land of calm monks, cherry blossoms, tea ceremonies, and quiet Zen gardens, you're not wrong. But that's only half the story. The other half? They literally had an instruction manual for how to die properly. No joke. In the West, people wrote books like How to Win Friends and Influence People. In feudal Japan, The bestseller would have been something like, How to Die with Style and Not Embarrass Your Family. All of it wrapped up in one word. Bushido. The Way of the Warrior. Sounds noble, right? Well, it is. And it's also terrifying. This was the philosophy that built some of the fiercest warriors in history, and the same one that made them kill themselves because they bowed at the wrong time. So what's in this deadly cocktail called Bushido? A blend of Shinto, purity and ancestors, Confucianism, duty and hierarchy, and Zen Buddhism, serenity in the face of impermanence. Mix it all together, and you get a moral code that made samurai both admirable and slightly horrifying. Its core message was painfully simple. Honor is everything. Lose it and you know what to do. That what to do was seppuku, or harakiri. Kneel, compose a farewell poem. Open your robe, slice your stomach, and let a trusted friend finish the job. Ideally quick, clean, and quiet. If that makes you shiver, remember, for them it was high ceremony. That's the air Tomoe Gozen was born into. She lived before Bushido became a formal rule book, but its spirit already ran through samurai blood. She didn't wield a sword because she wanted to prove herself. She did it because honor demanded it. If her home was attacked, she fought. If her lord died, she defended his name. And if she failed, she was ready to finish it with grace. In Bushido's universe, losing simply wasn't on the menu, no matter how final the ending had to be. The funny thing is, Bushido wasn't born as some polished moral doctrine. It evolved over centuries, like software updates, except every new version fixed one bug and added 2 new moral glitches. At first it was just warrior etiquette. Over time it upgraded into a spiritual operating system, where fighting well wasn't enough. You had to die correctly too. Put yourself in a samurai's shoes for a second. You lose a battle. In most places you'd run. Here, you write a short poem, take a deep breath and reach for your blade. Because in Bushido, living in shame was worse than dying beautifully. Death wasn't the end. It was your final autograph on your reputation. But here's the catch. Bushido never wrote a chapter for women, not because they had no honor, just because the men writing the rules forgot to include them. Guides for women like Onodaigaku, lessons for women, taught how to bow, serve tea, and obey, not how to behead an intruder. So when Tomoe Gozen showed up, she was like a bug in the system. She didn't just follow Bushido. She hacked it. No manual, no permission, she just lived it. If Bushido was a compass for honor, Tomoe proved it could point to anyone, male or female. Then came the Kamakura period, when samurai became Japan's ruling class. They didn't just carry swords, they carried laws. Bushido turned from spirit into standard, which sounds noble until you realize it also became a dictatorship of honor. You couldn't laugh too loud. You couldn't show fear. If someone insulted you, you didn't argue. You disemboweled yourself. Society became a parade of perfectly disciplined statues, stoic, silent, terrifyingly polite. The cost? A culture so obsessed with self-control that it bordered on self-erasure. Bushido taught that fear was weakness, so people hid it. That emotion was a burden, so they buried it. That honor was eternal, so they died for it. And over time, more people died for pride than for battle. Drop your master's sword. Anywhere else, you'd get fired. Here, you'd get a funeral. Don't get me wrong, Bushido wasn't pure evil. It created loyalty, integrity, courage. It forged warriors who fought not for money or power, but for face, for reputation. But sometimes they were so loyal they forgot they were human. Centuries later, Nitobe Inazo wrote Bushido, The Soul of Japan, 1900, calling it the unwritten moral code of the Japanese. Sounds poetic. But really, Bushido was also a velvet trap. When honor stands too high, it stops being virtue and starts being a cage. You live not to be good, but to avoid shame. Every mistake becomes a potential death sentence, preferably a stylish one. And yet Tomoe reminds us of something older, truer, that Bushido at its heart isn't about ritual, it's about integrity. She didn't argue when told women couldn't be samurai. She just put on armor and rode out. She didn't shrink under Bushido's weight. She bent it open. She turned honor from a man's privilege into a human right. Tomoe wasn't just a warrior, she was the system's feedback loop. Bushido set the rules. She tested them and sent back the results. Turns out, this code works for everyone. What she added, what the system forgot, was simple. Humanity. At its core, Bushido never required you to be male, never forced you to kill, never demanded death. It only asked one question: are you living true to your own honor? And sometimes the bravest answer is to smile and do what others said you couldn't. Bushido didn't vanish when the samurai did. You still see it in Japan's work ethic, in deep bows and public apologies. A bow isn't just manners, it's a spiritual echo of centuries of discipline. But that legacy is heavy. Even today, amid neon lights and matcha lattes, Bushido's shadow whispers that failure is shame, that mistakes are sins. Maybe the modern update should read differently. Honor matters, but only if it doesn't crush you. Otherwise, we're just dying beautifully instead of living honestly. So what does a completed Bushido look like? Not deletion, but translation. Duty without fanaticism, pride without punishment, loyalty without blindness. Keep the backbone, honesty, courage, discipline. Drop the armor, obsession, rigidity, performance. Wear the sword to remind yourself to stand tall, not to cut yourself down. And if you ask Tomoe Gozen what she'd say to that, she'd probably smirk and say, live right. That's enough. She never needed a theory to do what was right. For her, honor was action, not lecture. So maybe this is the line to carve at the end of this story. Bushido isn't a death manual. It's a mirror. Look into it, and you'll see your bravest self. And maybe your most dangerous one too. What matters isn't how deeply you bow, but how you rise afterward. And if someday you hear the faint thump of taiko drums in the distance, listen closer. Somewhere between past and present, Tomoe Gozen is still riding, reminding us that strength has no gender, and that honor doesn't need blood to be real. Because if history was once written in blood and signed with a blade, today we can write it with choice and sign it with kindness. Still just as proper, just a lot less messy. If you think Japanese women wielding spears only existed in Tomoe Gozen's time, you're underestimating the durability of Bushido. It didn't just survive war, it evolved. And trust me, there's nothing more formidable than an ancient tradition that learns how to adapt. After the Kamakura era, Japan entered the Edo period, more than 250 relatively peaceful years under the Tokugawa shogunate. With no giant bloodbaths to fight, samurai suddenly found themselves out of a job. A country built with swords had to learn to live by the brush. Samurai were nudged into becoming officials, teachers, thinkers. Sounds classy, right? Sure. But a lot of them mostly wrote poetry and missed the smell of iron. Bushido didn't vanish. It just changed stages, from battlefield to classroom, from steel blades to wooden ones. And here's the twist. When men hung up their swords, women picked up the spears. In samurai households, daughters were trained with the naginata, a long polearm with a curved blade, as part of their moral education. In the West, ladylike meant piano lessons. In Edo, Japan, ladylike meant spinning a polearm so cleanly that, hypothetically, an enemy's head would arc on the proper trajectory. People even joked about onadaigaku no naginata, female ethics, via long spear. Not a joke, actually. There were formal schools. Not home ec, but the art of precise spear work. Sounds contradictory? Society barred women from the battlefield, while teaching them to kill beautifully. In reality, it was history's patch. When men were away, governing, teaching, or drinking and debating, who stood at the gate? Exactly, women trained to use the naginata. The naginata wasn't just a weapon. It was soft power in blade form. It let women keep decorum, I'm staying home, father, and keep Bushido. In many clans, the katana was a man's soul. The naginata was a woman's spirit. Both were symbols of honor. One hung in the reception room to show off. The other stood by the door to greet special visitors. From the 1600s to the 1800s, thousands of samurai women trained this way. They didn't march to war, but they lived like warriors. Disciplined, discreet, ready. And sometimes, when chaos flared, they stepped out from behind the screen, spear in hand, and left a line or two of legend. One of those legends was Nakano Takeko. Born in 1847, just as the Tokugawa order was wobbling and the West was pounding on the door, Takeko grew up in Awazu, today's Fukushima. She studied literature, swordsmanship, tactics. Bushido was taught the way life skills are now. While her friends practiced calligraphy, she fell in love with the naginata. Her teacher praised her grip as steady as any man's, and she smiled. Then maybe Bushido shouldn't have a gender. Yes, she bent the system before feminism even had a passport stamp. In 1868, the Bushido War erupted between imperial reformers, opening and modernizing, and Tokugawa loyalists, holding the line. Awazu was branded a stronghold for the shogunate. The men went to war. When imperial forces pressed the city, the women of Awazu didn't sit around. They formed the Joshitai, the Women's Volunteer Corps. Their commander? Nakano Takeko, early 20s. Picture it. The enemy had rifles and cannon. Takeko and her unit had naginata, short swords, and Bushido burning in their chests. She led from the front, light armor, hair-pinned high, eyes like sharpened steel. In the battle for Awazu that year, she cut through imperial soldiers, until a bullet struck her in the chest. Before she fell, she turned to her sister. "Don't let them disgrace me. Sever my head and bury it apart." Her sister did exactly that. The enemy bowed. Her comrades built a shrine at Hokaiji. The stone still stands. Final resting place of Nakano Takeko, who kept Aizu's honor. What do we see here? Bushido reborn, this time in the figure of a young woman. She didn't ask permission to have honor. She made honor. No gender certificate required. After Takeko, hundreds of women from Awazu took up arms. Many died without names, but a silhouette remained. A woman with a naginata, graceful and terrifying. The Japanese have a word both beautiful and a little sad. Onimusha, woman warrior. And the more modern Japan became, the more that image got, packaged as a souvenir. In the Meiji era and beyond, society urged women to be gentle. Stories like Takeko or Tomoe were nudged into the mythic appendix. They became figures in no theater, ukiyo-e prints, or glossy layers in samurai video games. Beautiful, but distant. Bushido lived on, but its feminine side was edited out, as if history was afraid women might do the job a little too well. Then time played its favorite prank. In the 20th century, with world wars raging, the Anabugeisha image was pulled back, as propaganda. Posters showed spear-bearing heroines defending the homeland, a remix of Takeko, Bushido's spirit intact. After the war, during rebuilding, the symbol shifted again. Women still strong, independent, decisive, just holding briefcases instead of spears. Translation complete, from honor with a blade to honor under deadline. Here's the fun part. Many girls' schools in Japan still teach naginata as a traditional sport. Not for brawls, for posture, breath, composure. The instructor doesn't say strike. She says stand correctly. But in each movement, Tomoe and Takeko flicker, every imagined cut carrying centuries of inheritance. Looking back, the Anabugeisha story is strength kept quiet, honor that doesn't ask to be approved. From Heian battlefields to Edo classrooms, from real blood to ritual form, the spirit didn't die. It just changed outfits. If Tomoe was the first flame, Takeko was the flare that reignited it. And the fire still glows quietly, beneath modern culture. What makes them unforgettable isn't the number of enemies they felled. It's how they existed in a world that didn't want them to. They didn't give speeches about fairness. They demanded the right to fight. And by fighting, they earned respect. That's why the tale travels. The female warrior shows up everywhere now. Hollywood, anime, cosplay. Anytime a woman stands, blade in hand, Mulan, Beatrix Kiddo, anyone, you can hear the echo of Tomoe and Takeko. History still owes them one thing, telling their stories as people. Not just icons to gaze at, not just symbols to sell, people with fear, loyalty, and a refusal to be forgotten. If Tomoe taught us that women can be warriors, Takeko added, honor isn't inherited, it can be created. Today, when people say Asian feminism, Anabugeisha rarely come up. Ironically, that's their finest point. They didn't need a movement's label, because they lived it before it had a name. They didn't chant. They acted, and that silence has outlasted entire speeches. So next time you see a woman in kimono with a naginata in an old print, don't brush it off as traditional aesthetics. It's a visual recording of history, where women didn't request equality. They became the proof. If there's one message Tomoe Gozen and Nakano Takeko would send forward, it's probably this. Honor isn't in the sword. It's in the act. Strength doesn't need to be proved, only used at the right time. And silence can be the loudest shout, through them. Bushido stops being just the way of the warrior, and becomes the way of being human. To live straight. Take responsibility and refuse to kneel to prejudice. Which means the Anabugeisha journey didn't end in the past. It's still moving. In every bow, every calm smile, every woman walking through the modern world, carrying an invisible blade in her heart. If, back in the day, a samurai could slice open his own stomach to keep his honor, then today, A Japanese office worker might just pull 3 all-nighters. To finish a report, same spirit of Bushido, different weapon. The katana's gone. Now it's PowerPoint. After World War II, Japan was rubble. Bombed, burned, humiliated. National honor, reduced to ash. But instead of giving up, the Japanese did what they've always done best. They reinvented honor. No more battlefields, just boardrooms. No more generals, just CEOs. And so Bushido was reborn. Only this time, it wore a gray suit, a tie, carried a briefcase, and stared down each meeting like it was a duel to the death. They called it corporate Bushido. Same loyalty, same endurance, same sacrifice. Except now, instead of dying gloriously, people were quietly burning out. From the 1950s through the 70s, Japan rose from ashes into an economic miracle. Companies like Toyota, Sony, and Mitsubishi became the new training grounds of honor. Employees didn't just work, they served. A boss wasn't just a manager, he was a lord. A company wasn't just a job, it was a family, a sacred duty. The popular phrase back then was, "My work is my life." Sounds noble, right? Until you realize they meant it literally. Being late was shameful. Taking a vacation was disloyal. And retirement? Sure, if you happened to collapse at your desk. Modern Bushido had turned into the way of the overworked. Once upon a time, samurai died with honor. Now people lived exhausted, and society still called it virtue. And just like the old ritual of seppuku, modern Japan invented a new word for dying in service, karoshi, death by overwork. It's not an accident, it's a form of sacrifice. By 1989, the government admitted the unthinkable. Over 10,000 deaths every year were tied to overwork. No swords. No blood, just pressure, deadlines, and silence. No war drums, only keyboards. No glory, just caffeine and fluorescent light. And if you think it's just office workers, think again. Engineers, doctors, teachers, factory workers, anyone could fall. Because Bushido 2.0 taught endurance is strength. Silence is power. Burnout is honor. If Tomoe Gozen once charged into battle with her sword, the 20th century Japanese worker did the same thing, with a polite smile, after being scolded in front of their team. Different battlefield, same courage, less blood, but maybe just as much pain. Still, you can't deny this corporate Bushido helped Japan rise from ruin. Out of atomic ashes came an economic phoenix. In 2 decades, Japan became the second largest economy in the world. Their craftsmanship was so precise, the world had to catch up. Toyota became a religion, Sony became a symbol, and the belief behind it all was simple. Honor means never giving up. Once again, Bushido proved you don't need a sword to fight, just conviction, and maybe a really good timesheet. But like every legend, the glory came with a price. When Japan's economic bubble burst in the 1990s, the dream cracked. Companies collapsed. Lifelong employees were laid off. And for the first time in centuries, Japan had to ask, if loyalty doesn't guarantee survival, what does honor mean now? A new generation started to question the old code. They saw their fathers die for the company, their mothers cry in silence, and they asked, what's the point of honor if it makes you forget who you are? Japan entered its great awakening. People began to see that honor couldn't be measured in hours worked, or found in a paycheck. Thousands quit stable jobs and fled to the countryside, looking for a new kind of path. Not Bushido, but Jibundo, the way of the self. They didn't want to die for honor anymore. They wanted to live with meaning, and yet, Bushido never truly dies. It lingers in every bow, every apology, every act of care. It hides in the quiet precision of daily work. A sushi chef perfecting his knife angle for a decade. A Kyoto gardener trimming leaves one by one. A Shinkansen engineer apologizing because his train arrived 20 seconds early. Sounds crazy, right? But that's Bushido at its purest, not personal glory, but collective pride. Modern Bushido doesn't say, die beautifully. It says, do it so well. No one needs to thank you. Silence, discipline, grace. These are the new weapons of honor, but the shadows remain. That same gammon, the virtue of enduring pain quietly, keeps people from talking about burnout, depression, loneliness. Japan still faces one of the world's highest suicide rates. It's tragically poetic. The nation that once taught people how to die with honor is now struggling to teach them how to live. Yet even here, Bushido evolves. The new generations are rewriting the code again. Loyalty, yes, but not blind obedience. Responsibility, yes, but also self-respect. Dedication, Yes, but with balance. It's a softer Bushido. Kinder, more human. Fit for a world that needs both strength and empathy. And if you look closely, Bushido isn't just Japanese anymore. Every time someone pours their heart into their work, stands tall through hardship, or refuses to compromise their integrity, that's Bushido. 2. A doctor pulling an all-nighter but still smiling at patients. An artist perfecting a song nobody hears. A single mom working 2 jobs and never complaining. They don't carry swords, but the fire of Bushido burns in them just the same. Because in the end, Bushido was never really the way of the warrior. It's the way of the human in hard times. That's why it outlives empires and eras. 800 years later, it's still here, changing forms, never dying. So when you see a Japanese worker bowing deeply, a chef polishing his knife, or an engineer double-checking every bolt, don't just see perfectionism. See a living legacy of a people who once believed honor was worth dying for, and who are now learning to keep that same honor while staying alive. Because Bushido never disappeared. It just changed outfits, and from armor to a suit, from sword to keyboard. But inside, it's still the same flame. A fire of honesty, discipline, and unyielding pride. And when dying for honor was no longer an option, the Japanese learned something far more powerful: how to live for it. If the 20th century was when Bushido put on a suit and went to work, then the 21st century forced it to learn English and smile in team-building photos. Globalization hit Japan like a wave. A country used to bowing its head suddenly had to look up and face the world eye to eye. But here's the catch: honor, the moral compass that had guided Japan for centuries, didn't come with an international instruction manual. Because out there, in the land of move fast and break things, words like patience, humility, and taking full responsibility sound, well, kind of outdated. Once again, Bushido stood at a crossroads: adapt or be forgotten. And the Japanese, being masters of quiet reinvention, did what they do best. They turned ritual into lifestyle, and discipline into a global brand. They exported the spirit of Bushido in everything they touched, from sushi to anime, from precision manufacturing to customer service. The world began to realize that Japan's obsession with detail wasn't neurotic, it was spiritual. Ever noticed how a vendor in Tokyo might apologize because a mochi cracked slightly in the box? Or how a convenience store clerk bows to an empty doorway after you leave? That's not excellent customer service. That's Bushido, in retail form. Once samurai swore loyalty to their lords. Today, a convenience store clerk at Lawson shows the same devotion to passing customers, and they do it with the same terrifying seriousness. As Japan opened up, its companies stepped onto the world stage carrying one belief: quality is honor. Toyota, Sony, Canon, Nintendo, each one a modern warrior. No flashy promises, just quiet perfection. Westerners started scratching their heads. Why do Japanese people apologize when they didn't do anything wrong? The answer's simple: because honor doesn't need a reason. In the US, an apology means guilt. In Japan, it means respect. It's a way of saying, if the world's chaotic, at least I won't be the one to make it worse. But globalization was also a stress test. Bushido was born in a world of unity and order, not chaos and hyper-competition. Suddenly, that same discipline turned into a double-edged sword. Japanese companies, once unstoppable, began to stumble. They hesitated to take risks, because in Bushido logic, failure equals shame. Meanwhile, in Silicon Valley, failure's just the first demo. Same action, 2 outcomes. In America, failing makes you interesting. In Japan, failing can make you disappear, and that's the paradox. The same code of honor that once saved Japan was now holding it back. The very discipline that built Toyota and Sony became armor, too heavy for the digital age. Bushido, if it didn't evolve, risked becoming a museum piece in a world run by algorithms. But the Japanese aren't blind to that. The younger generations are already hacking Bushido. They still value respect, but they breathe easier. They still work hard, but they pause for a matcha latte. They've redefined honor, not as endless endurance, but as doing good work without losing yourself. In Japan's new startup culture, the buzzword is ikigai, your reason to live. It's Bushido's gentler cousin. No longer fight to the end, but live with purpose. It's Bushido that knows how to smile, how to cry, how to say I'm tired. Ironically, to survive in a global world, Japan's sense of honor had to learn how to soften, And maybe that's its truest evolution yet. Because in an age that rewards speed and noise, quiet care and precision have become the ultimate competitive edge. A slowly poured cup of tea, a product perfected down to the last screw, each whispering the same truth: honor can't be rushed. After 8 centuries, Bushido has become a global language of dedication, no longer just the warrior's philosophy. It's the DNA of Japanese civilization itself. From Tomoe Gozen's blade, to Tokyo's skyscrapers, to a Kyoto cafe, to every whisper-quiet hybrid car on the highway, Bushido never died. It just went corporate international. And in a world obsessed with winning fast, Bushido still murmurs, "It's okay. Do it right first, win later." Because in the end, no matter the country, the century, or the language, honor is the one thing you can't outsource. And Bushido, like a silent samurai wandering the digital age, still stands there, calm amid the noise, with a faint smile and an invisible sword, a blade forged from devotion. If Bushido once taught people how to fight with a sword, then the 21st century is teaching them how to fight with algorithms. And naturally, the Japanese, a people who once wrote an instruction manual for how to die, are now writing an ethical code for artificial intelligence. Sounds like a joke, right? It's not. It's dead serious. Because for Japan, if something can act like a human, it should also learn how to behave like a decent one. In the West, we teach AI how to win. In Japan, they teach it how to bow at a 30-degree angle and make sure no one loses face in the process. Back in the day, samurai trained their hands to never tremble when striking. Today, Japanese engineers program their machines to know exactly when to apologize. You might laugh, but that's Bushido, coded in binary, an ancient philosophy running on a silicon chip. In Tokyo labs, they're asking questions like, can a robot have honor? It sounds strange, but it gets to the heart of what Bushido has always been about. Power without morality is just violence with Wi-Fi. While the world races to make AI faster, smarter, stronger, Japan quietly asks a different question. Can it be polite? Because for them, the goal isn't to build the perfect machine. It's to build the humble one. They're not just teaching AI what to do. They're teaching it how not to offend anyone while doing it. It sounds soft, but it's one of the strongest philosophies out there. That idea comes straight from Bushido. A person should never lose their humanity in the pursuit of power. Now Japan is applying the same rule to machines. An AI without ethics, to them, is no different from a samurai without honor. Efficient. Yes, but empty. So instead of coding machines to conquer, they code them to serve. Reception robots in Tokyo bow with precision. Mechanical arms wrap packages with the same grace as a tea ceremony. Every movement guided by an old commandment. If you're going to do something, do it with respect. The world says, AI will replace humans. Japan replies, then let's make sure it behaves like a gentleman. A graceful answer, and maybe a little terrifying, but that's Bushido. Version 6.0, the way of the digital warrior. No swords, only code. No lords to defend, just human values. Because in the end, whether you're a samurai or a software engineer, whether you wield a blade or a keyboard, honor is still what gives your actions meaning. And maybe one day, when AI finally understands us, it'll learn what the Japanese wrote down 1,000 years ago. True strength isn't about what you can do. It's about how you choose to do it. Bushido hasn't disappeared. It's just been updated. Running on artificial chips, programmed with ethics, and maintained by something no algorithm can ever copy: the human heart. If you think Bushido belongs in a museum, you're wrong. It's alive and well. It just has a global marketing campaign now, and its own QR code, honor. Once something samurai would literally die to protect, now comes neatly packaged, labeled Made in Japan, and shipped worldwide, along with a polite 30-degree bow. From tea ceremonies to sushi, bonsai to Lexus, they all share one philosophy: do ordinary things with extraordinary care. Japan pulled off something no one expected. They turned ethics into branding, humility into a competitive edge, and Bushido into a national value chain. And the world, it's obsessed. Everyone wants the samurai spirit, just without the sword part. Western CEOs run workshops on Bushido-style leadership. Global corporations hire Japanese consultants to teach the culture of respect. And somewhere in a corporate team-building retreat, someone's bowing, mostly for the group photo. Honor, once sacred, has become a marketable concept. You don't have to live by Bushido anymore, you just have to look like you do. But here's the irony. While the world is busy learning how to sell Bushido, the Japanese are still quietly trying to preserve it. No hashtags, no TED Talks, no self-promotion. They just do their work, with precision, grace, and silence, as if every small act were a ceremony. And that silence? That's what makes the rest of the world admire them and feel just a little bit ashamed. Bushido isn't dead. It just changed careers. From warrior code to business strategy, from sacred ritual to cultural export, from sword to logo. And in a world that never stops talking, Bushido still whispers its timeless rule. Do it well first. Speak later. Do it for real. Don't show off. Maybe that's Bushido's final victory, turning honor into a brand without losing its soul. Because sometimes, the deepest bow isn't about submission. It's a quiet reminder to the world that humility is the highest form of pride. If this story made you see things a little differently, hit that subscribe button to explore more untold corners of history. The ironic, the human, the beautifully flawed. And if you believe that real values deserve to be shared, go ahead, share this video. Because somewhere out there, someone might need to hear this today.